Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. Welcome. We're so happy that you've joined us. On the East Coast, we're in the afternoon period, but we're happy that you've joined us for another episode of the Chicken Box. Yes, I know box is spelled with one X. We spell it with two. Our theme is "Don't be a chicken, get on the box." Now, if you are from um, the Baltimore, Maryland, or DMV area, you know full well that a chicken box consists of, depends on who you talk to, four wings and fries, and then you can argue about the ketchup or the hot sauce. But so we're on the box today. We have an exciting guest today. I'm Frances Toni Draper, CEO of the 133, almost 134-year-old Afro, used to be called Afro American Newspapers, but we just go by Afro News now. And we're no longer a newspaper. We certainly continue to be a media outlet. And I am so happy today to have two guests hosts with me on today. They're going to introduce themselves. Usually I'm joined by Jay Jackson and Impeccable, both of whom are traveling on today. And so if you are watching this on either Facebook or LinkedIn, I think on YouTube, please let somebody know that we are on the box and we have an exciting episode today. And so we're going to jump right in with introducing our co-hosts for the day. They're going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to bring our guest on. I think, listen, you're going to be really excited and informed. We have a guest that's going to talk to us about real estate, talk to us about generational wealth, talk to us about leaving a legacy, and talk to us about why he's so passionate and so successful at what he does. Megan, introduce yourself, and then we'll come to you, Alexis.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody, Afro friends and family. My name is Megan Sales. I'm a staff writer with the Afro. We were just discussing this before the call, Dr. Draper, but I have been with the Afro nearly 5 years now. I come from Report for America as a fellow on the business beat, but then I stuck around and now I kind of do general assignment reporting. I'm just excited about this conversation today. So thank you.
That's great. And Alexis?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis LaRue. I am an intern with the Afro. I have been here since January and I've been covering multiple things, and I am just so grateful to be here, especially as an intern with the Afro.
All right, Alexis, you got to give a shout out to your HBCU. You got to tell folk where you're interning from and all of that. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I am going to be a soon graduate of Morgan State University, and one of my professors gave me the opportunity for this internship, and so now I'm here.
All right, go Bears. That's my alma mater. Alexis, you're representing us well. So a report yesterday, a research report published by Word in Black that says adults who have graduated from HBCUs have better mental health and stability in their later years. Isn't that good to know, Alexis?
It is very good to know.
Because HBCUs build up your confidence.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So welcome, Megan and Alexis. We are glad to hear you. I'm excited about our guest for this afternoon. And so he is coming to the stage, as we call it. He's coming on now, Mr. Ashley Thomas III. And
Good
here
morning.
he is. Hi there, Mr. Thomas. Welcome to the Chicken Box.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate it.
We are so happy that you are here. I'm going to ask you to say a little bit more about yourself, except for what I'm going to say now. You serve as the president of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, a position that you've held since July of 2025 to the present through next year, 2027. I'm going to say this about you, but I want you to say some other things in the form of introduction. Your LinkedIn profile says that you are dedicated to delivering excellent service to your clients, as well as educating them on the importance of generating legacy wealth. So we welcome you to the Chicken Box. We welcome our viewers to the Chicken Box. Hey, Byron Deese, I saw your hello, and we're glad that you are here. Come on, tell us some more about you so we can get to know you a little better.
Absolutely. So I reside in Los Angeles, California. I've been in real estate. This is going into my 27th year. Um, Alexis, you'll be happy to know that I am a HBCU dad, not of Morgan State. My daughter goes to Tuskegee. She's in her third year, so I'm very proud of her and all the work that she's doing. But yes, as NAREB president, we fight for democracy in housing. We've been around since 1947. Truly building Black wealth through homeownership is our mantra and what we do every day. So I'm very excited about that. Personally, I own a mortgage company and real estate company. And like I said, I've been in the business for 27 years. I got into the business because I was actually working in the loan servicing side, helping people that were facing foreclosure. And I wanted to help people prevent even going there on the front side. So I wanted to get more on the origination side, working with families, putting them on a path of success as opposed to trying to bail people out. And so that's my passion, really building wealth, and something that I volunteer on and I'm excited about.
Well, great. That's great. I think everybody on this panel and everyone who's watching is interested in how to build wealth, right? How to build wealth. And so Megan, you look like you're dying to jump in. You have anything you want to ask our guests?
Yeah, I do. What you just were mentioning there, and I saw on your website, fighting for democracy in housing. This in general, I think, is a time that a lot of us are losing some faith in democracy in general. So I just wanted to have you talk a little bit more about what that means in practice. What is fighting for democracy in housing, and why is it especially needed today?
Yeah, I think there's two parts of democracy. Like, one is an internal part that we look at in terms of our community. What do we need to do in terms of education, understanding why homeownership is very important, the actual classes, financial literacy, and doing all of those things that we should be doing anyways, that have been unfortunately removed from a lot of public schools across the country. Then the other side is policy, because policy is very important and it's a passion of mine. I spent a lot of time in DC fighting policy, trying to open up the credit box for us to be able to have access. But when you really look at the gap in America, we look at the wealth gap. We can look at the homeownership gap. Homeownership rate in the Black community is about 43%. In the white community, it's 72%. And it's larger today than it was in 1968 when we passed the Fair Housing Act. And so when we look at policy created the gap. And so we believe, fighting for democracy in housing, that there can be policy that can elevate the Black community in terms of home ownership and wealth, and be very intentional about it. And so that's our ask. We're unapologetic about it. We can cite historical context that created the gap. And so our fight is democracy in housing. Let's identify policy that will help future generations.
That's great. So we've got somebody in the future generation right here as one of our guest hosts today. And so, Alexis, you have a question either from your vantage point, I mean, from what Mr. Thomas said, or something else that's on your heart that you want to ask?
Yes. So as a college student myself, I was just wondering, what advice would you give to those in college trying to build wealth, especially if they want to potentially buy a home in the future?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so this is a great question because it talks a little bit about policy and how student loans are impacting students to even think about buying a home in the future. And so for us, it's really about on the personal side. And, we want to look at identifying careers that would generate income and build wealth that you can leverage off of. In terms of democracy, understanding that even your first home is not your final home. Right. And I think a lot of times when we're in the marketplace looking for housing or home ownership, we want that perfect place. And I think it's very important. My first property, it turned into a rental later, but it was something that I was able to get into. It's on an affordable side of town. And it allowed me entrance, and I grew a lot of wealth from that particular property. And so I think speaking to younger people is more so about the opportunity of what happens on the backside of ownership. It's very important to understand that. And so we do a lot of classes in terms of with the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. We work with HBCUs all of the time. And so we do a lot of careers in real estate is very important as well. And even if you don't take a career, taking sometimes the classes will help you have a better direction in the future. So
that's great. So that brings us to the question. So families, first-time home buyers, I mean, what should they know about real estate and building wealth? Well, for some people, it just sounds like it's just so out of reach. The requirements that you have for down payments, or for your credit to be a certain way. People feel like, okay, I can make these payments once I get there, but I mean, how do they get there? What do they have to do?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think we as an association have 115 local boards across this country. So we have someone in Baltimore, we have people in Philadelphia, Miami, Los Angeles, that will hold your hand through the process. I think it's very important. The two things that are the greatest barriers to homeownership for our community, number one is credit. So understanding your credit is very, very important. How credit usage can impact the home buying process is very important. And then number two, down payment. But there's a lot of down payment assistance programs that are out there that are just underutilized. And so we have access to all of the programs. Our Realtors members are trained to be able to walk through the process. But there's even closing costs. So you have a down payment that you have to come up with, and then you have to have closing costs, right? And so there's programs out there that will provide both down payment assistance and closing costs. I think Baltimore is a great example. The city is also helping in terms of bridging the gap of home ownership. And so that's something that we go to other cities and say, be like Baltimore, right? And so those programs are very important as well. And I think the mayor has done a great job in terms of really wanting to increase home ownership for the city. So those programs are very important, but there are also private programs, national programs. So you don't just get caught in the city programs or the financial institutions. There's more than that that's out there as well.
So where does somebody start? Let's say they've never owned a home and they hear us saying, "Oh yeah, well there are programs there." So where do they start?
So we would recommend that you go to our website, NAREB, right? And you can find a Realtors member that's close to you that can walk you through everything that you need to do. And so we are revamping that part right now because we're bringing in other areas as well. So if you need a contractor, you can go to our website, and we call it Keep It Community. So we want to keep all of our dollars in our community. And we want to make sure that you get the answers that you deserve. So you can go onto our website, connect with somebody who's local to you, and they'll be able to walk you through right away. But I think you also put my handles up there. If anybody is out there, I'm very intentional about this. This is a passion for me. So don't hesitate to call me or send me a message on LinkedIn or social or Instagram, and I will connect you to the right person. But we want to make sure that we grow Black wealth in America through home ownership being a great vehicle to do so.
Well, that's great. Maybe this is a good time for me to put a plug in while Megan's contemplating the next question. Love to talk to you offline about how we may partner with Black media to help get your message out. Okay?
Absolutely. We love to do that as well. So when we talk about keep it community, that's in our media, that's in our attorneys, everything, right? And I think that's something that we need to be doing a little bit more in our community.
Yeah, I think so too.
We go outside, we might have a different caterer, but even if you have an event, I want my caterer to be like me because I know that they don't get the opportunity in other venues.
Right. I mean, there are lots of opportunities in Black media. We're having an event this month. 1,200 people are going to be there. So those who are sponsoring will get their message out that way. But I'm not here to plug that right now. I'm here to talk about, what you're up to. Megan, you want to ask Mr. Thomas? You look like you're just itching to ask.
Yes. I have a follow-up of what you were talking about before. Obviously you have this very large team of trusted professionals, realtists. But I wanted to ask for people who maybe they don't end up connecting with one of these people and they are trying to kind of vet the real estate professional that they're considering working with. What are some red flags that they should be aware of? What should they be considering as they're trying to select a real estate professional to work with them as they're starting this homeownership, home buying journey?
Yeah, so I think one of the red flags is payment up front to an agent. That should never happen. Real estate agents are paid at the conclusion of the transaction. So if there's anything fraudulent that feels like, oh, well, I have to pay my agent some money, that's something that we want to definitely say as a red flag. The other thing is, we're in 2026, but steering is a problem still to this day, where if you want to live in a specific neighborhood, you have the right to go see that neighborhood. If your agent is saying, no, you won't like it over there, let me show you something else, that's an indication of steering. It's very problematic for us. And even on the lending side, if you don't feel comfortable that your lender has your best interest or they're not explaining something to you, I would always tell my clients, I would say, by the time we're done with this transaction, I want you to feel like you can do my job, because you should know every piece of it. And if you feel that you are asking questions and the person is not receptive to your questions, then you need a different representative, right? Because you should be able to ask anything. This is the largest purchase many of us will ever make in life. And so if you have to tell the agent to slow down, I need more information, I'm not sure why this is, I don't understand what this term means, that's your right. And so we want to make sure that that happens. So those are red flags for me. I always talk about let's take our time and walk through this. If you say, I'm not going to be ready right now, I'll be ready in the summer, and somebody's pushing you, you need to find somebody that you feel very comfortable with. So
that's great to know. That's really great to know. Before I turn to Alexis, you triggered something. There's some new laws, right, about brokers and fees and agents, and I need to make a distinction between the two. Can you help explain that? People seem to be really confused about that.
Yeah, so one of the greatest changes that our industry has gone through in the last 2 years is we used to take listings, and so you'd have a listing broker put a property up for sale, and they would go to the seller and say, you know, we're going to charge you 5% or 6%, but we have to pay the other agent. Who that agent is, we don't know. But at some point, we're going to have to pay them. So we'll do the listing for 5%, 2.5% to the listing agent, and then we'll reserve the other 2.5% for the buyer's agent. Well, that's actually has changed as of recent. So now it's today you take the percentage of whatever the listing is, but the buyer's agent would have to ask the seller to pay for their commission unless the buyer was going to pay for it out of pocket. So this is something that's been very challenging for us, because a lot of our buyers don't have that extra money to pay the commission for their agent. So it still is a normal practice that the sellers are covering partial or all of the costs of the buyer's agent. But that is a change. Before it used to just already be built into the process. Now it's not. There's actually a couple other steps in terms of negotiation on this. So, you know, that's very scary, because if the seller says, hey, I don't want to pay the commission, what happens? Does the buyer not get the house? Does the agent say, unfortunately, I can't give you, you know, I don't want to proceed because I'm not going to be compensated for that? And so there's been a little bit of issues that's happened, but it hasn't been widespread that we've heard about. And so that's good. But I think the other way was a little bit more transparent and allowed us to work better, so.
Yeah, thank you. That clears it up some. It's still a little confusing, but thank you. Alexis.
It's all about the money. At the end of the day, everybody in the process wants to get paid, and now it's just a different negotiation on how you get paid. So you're negotiating the transaction, you're negotiating the purchase. At the same time, you could potentially be negotiating your commission. I think that's a conflict in many cases. So it's something that we weren't supportive of, but we have to live with it today.
Right, and then I don't know who's doing the negotiation. Is it the consumer, or is it between the two agents?
They're typically the agents. The agents are represented, so they're going to be the ones communicating.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that could be challenging. All right, Alexis, thank you for that.
Since we're kind of on the topic of money and cost, how can financial institutions better support underserved communities?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's something that we deal with. I think also, Dr. Draper, when you talk about Black media, some of your partnerships, probably over the last 12, 14 months, we've seen an exit from supporting underserved or minority organizations and media. And so I think showing up is very important. Like I stated, it's really funny to me, because if you look at Black homeownership rates set at 43%, in any other business, you would say if 56-7% of people need my services, I'm going to pour all my money into it. White homeownership is sitting at 72%. So that gap to 100 is 28%. So you're really not going to market towards that. You market towards the biggest opportunity for your business to make money. And so we still are dealing with challenges in that particular area. I think financial institutions, and we work with some great ones, but I think financial institutions have to understand the culture as opposed to understanding that this is Mr. and Mrs. Jones that are trying to purchase a home for their family, not loan number 125773, right? We need to not be considered transactional and understand that this is a family that we're talking about. And this is somebody that wants to raise their children or grow a family in this particular home. So to them, it means more than just transaction, closing costs, down payment assistance, credit scores. All of those numbers are, come into play. But at the end of the day, this is a family. And so I think when we start to lose that, then we lose who we are. And so I love that our realtors, we understand that. When I close a transaction, I send a thank you on behalf of the family to everyone, the title officer. I send it out to everyone and I just say thank you, because I want to remind you that even though there was a loan number attached to this, there was a family first. And so thank you for supporting this Black family. And so I think that that's very important for us.
Mm-hmm. Because black home ownership hasn't grown much in the last 50 years maybe.
Correct. Yeah, we've been very stagnant. We were, the most we got to in terms of home ownership rate across the country was 49.1%. That was in the early 2000s. And if you can remember, there were a lot of different type of loan products that were out at that time. Many of them were riskier products, and we lost a lot of wealth in 2008 foreclosure crisis. And so the growth of income has not kept up with the cost of living. We've seen that wages have not increased, but homeownership has more than doubled. In many markets, it's tripled in the last 10 years. For us, we're very passionate about it. And I think even the conversation of homeownership has really taken a back seat in the last 5 to 8 years, because we've been dealing with housing. I'm in Los Angeles. The conversation has always been around homelessness, and it hasn't been on building wealth. So the middle class has really been left out of this conversation. And so NAREB, we're going to take an 8-city bus tour coming up, and we want to take it to the streets and really get back home ownership, building wealth through home ownership back on the forefront of the conversation.
Tell where are you going? What 8 cities are you coming to? We have viewers from we're based in Baltimore, but this is social media age, and so we have nearly a million viewers all over the world. So where are you going?
Well, let's say we're getting on a bus for 8 days. And we're going to 8 days, right? So one of the things that was important to me is I said, I want to do grassroots movements. I want people to feel if they're going to sit on this bus for 8 days, then I should show up, right? Okay. And so that's very important. So we're going to kick this off April 25th down the street. We're going to go down to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on April 25th. We're excited to be there. We will come to Baltimore on the 26th. Carter Memorial Church of God in Christ. We will be there for a service, and then we will have a full educational home ownership developer, all of these classes. And I'll talk a little bit about the classes, but we'll leave there on April 27th and go to Detroit, Michigan. April 28th, we're in Gary, Indiana. April 29th, Kansas City, Missouri. April 30th, we're going to Memphis, Tennessee. May 1st, Little Rock, Arkansas, and then May 2nd, we were going to conclude in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, and really bring it all together in terms of building Black wealth through home ownership. And so when each of these stops, we're going to be teaching classes. Again, we got to talk to renters about becoming homeowners. So part of the classes are going to be geared towards that. The first class is how do you put your rent onto your credit report the right way? Right, your credit score impacts so many different things in your life, whether it's your credit card interest rates, your car interest rate, or buying a home. And so we understand that. So how do we get our rental payments that we've been paying on time for many years onto our credit? That's number one. Number two, many of the cities that we're working in, all of the cities are African-American mayors are in these cities. We're working with the African-American Mayors Association. We selected the cities because they were deemed affordable, meaning that the median income could support a median purchase price or sales price. And so we're very much about that as well. But also the cities also have housing authorities that will work with taking someone from Section 8 housing voucher in moving that to a homeownership voucher. Many people don't know that you can convert your housing voucher to a homeownership voucher, right? And it will subsidize your mortgage payment, which is ultimately building wealth. So that's something that we're very excited about as well. Heirs property rights, we will have one-on-one sessions from attorneys that will be able to sit there and talk to you about how to set up your trust. So that way, when you pass on, that your property can still remain growing wealth in your family. And so it doesn't have to go to probate court, which probate takes a lot of money and wealth out of the families. And so we will have people there. If you already are in that situation, you can bring your scenario and the attorneys will talk to you about what you need to do in order to clean up your title and clean up your home. We can do that as well. We will also have housing counselors on site. So if you're interested in buying a home, a housing counselor will talk to you about your credit. What do you need to do? These are free services for everyone. But then if you're behind, right, in the last 14 months, almost 750 Black people have lost their jobs, right? And so these are actual people that are homeowners. So if we want to build wealth through home ownership, yes, we want to bring in the next future homeowner, but we got to keep people in their homes too. So there's an opportunity. If you're behind, you can come and talk to one-on-one with a counselor about how to keep yourself in the home and getting a modification or getting some type of assistance. And that's a free service as well. And so we really want to roll out free services to the community. All of these services are open. They're open to everyone. Please come out. You can go to closingthegaptour.com. And there will be registration links for each city, and the times and all of the details and locations are on that site.
Wow, that's really great news. And you all are going clearly across country in a few days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because who knew that you could take your rent and apply it the right way and impact your credit score? So I think everything that you said is so impactful. Listen, you really do need, we really do need to talk about how to advertise this through the Black press, because every city that you're going to also has a viable Black-owned media outlet to help get this word out. This is fantastic. What do you think about that, Megan?
Yes, I mean, I think that's incredible. I mean, to be really hitting the ground running and going across the country, especially being intentional about going to cities with Black mayors as well, just really being able to engage, our people in this important conversation. And there just are so many outside external forces that can impact whether somebody can buy a home. And so to have a team of people that are there to give you this advice, to tell you about the mistakes to avoid, and to just make sure that you are as prepared as possible to make, your dream a reality, I think is just really amazing. And something that you mentioned though, while you were talking about the tour, heirs property. Mm-hmm. That was a very interesting, I've done some coverage of that in the past, and learning about how much land loss has accumulated for Black people, especially between kind of that 1900s and early 2000s. I think it was about 80% of land loss is due to heirs property. Can you talk a little bit about that for people who don't know what heirs property is? And it's especially an important issue here in Baltimore with the tax sale, which comes up in a couple months.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So heirs property is, family members. My grandmother owned a property, and it was left to the family. But her paperwork was in order. It knew who was going to be the executor of the trust. If the property was sold, how would the proceeds going to be distributed amongst the family? Those are very important. When you lack a vehicle that describes what happens after death, then it has to go through the court system. And so when it goes to the court system, you now have to have an attorney, you have to have a court date. Meanwhile, if there's a mortgage, mortgages need to be paid, taxes need to be paid, insurance needs to be paid. And so all of those things are happening while you're trying to figure it out. And so we are very supportive in terms of making sure there's some congressional bills that are being worked on to make heirs property easier process. We believe as an association that at the time of closing, you should start having the trust developed automatically when you purchase a home because we don't know what tomorrow holds, right? And we all want to live a long life. You know, I think there's a fear in talking about this topic within our community, right? I went to go get life insurance and I said, I kept pushing that off and off and off, but I knew that my children needed it in case something were to happen to me, but I didn't want to have that conversation. And I think this is a great opportunity to have those types of conversations with someone who's an expert in that field and be able to walk you and hold your hand throughout the process. But a lot of times we don't want to talk about that because for whatever reason, I think in the back of our mind, if we talk about it, it becomes a reality, right?
Or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we want to be able to facilitate those conversations that probably should be held at the kitchen table with the family. But if they can't be held there, then, you know, they can be held at one of our stops at the bus tour stop, and we can help you walk through that.
And you'll also help people that have already passed that, right? I mean, you know, there are people who are living in heirs property and it belongs to the person who's deceased, and really it's not a clear title. So what should people bring when they come?
Yeah, so they can bring any information that they have that's related to the property. A lot of this stuff is public knowledge, so we can be able to pull that out. I'll give you a great example on heirs property rights and why it's important to make sure that the affairs are in order. We had the Los Angeles fires in Louisiana. There were hurricanes, Florida hurricane. Natural disasters are becoming a part of daily life in America. You can talk about your belief in climate change, but we understand that these things happen. And so when the federal government through FEMA comes out to support you, right, they want to know who the owner of this property is. And if you can't justify who the owner is, you might lose an opportunity to get the assistance that you actually need. And so we want to make sure that there's no gap in understanding who the actual owner is of the property in case of an event like we've seen recently. But even outside of that, if there's something that you needed to do on the property, you want to make sure that you're the rightful owner and can move forward. And so we're seeing more and more stories through people have lost their homes through tax sales because they didn't understand that the taxes were being paid or needed to be paid. And so that's very important. And so we want to take the full body of ownership, right? Getting new ones in, but we want to keep you in as well. So I'm excited that that's a part of a very important part of our mission, heirs property rights, because it's growing and we're losing properties and we're losing a lot of wealth in our community as a result.
Wow, you could spend 8 days, I'm sure, in one city. But that's great advocacy and great information. I've not heard of that kind of advocacy on behalf of community. So kudos to NAREB for just doing this, you know, starting, you said next week, a couple of weeks in Philadelphia, and then on to Baltimore. So those of us who are in the Baltimore area, say the website again, Mr. Thomas, so people, or put it back up, Asia, so people will know where to go.
Yeah, so we put closingthegaptour.com. You can go directly.
Closingthegaptour.com.
Yeah, so we be very intentional. And it's funny, I'll say, I use that word intentional. Right. I want to be intentional about getting Black people into home ownership, intentional. And it's funny, when I was talking to a lot of our members, they said, well, we want to be intentional, too, with this bus tour. Make sure that we're not going through any sundown towns and that we going to have a safe route. OK, and I said, yes, we're going to make sure we're going to be safe routes. So, yes.
Make sure you don't need the green book to come through. Well, listen, you know you're safe when you come to Baltimore.
I know we're safe when we go to Baltimore. We got a long ride. We got a long ride to Detroit from Baltimore, but
that is. That's a nice. But you'll be safe when you get to Detroit, yes, as well. And in Philadelphia, there's the Philadelphia Tribune. That's your Black-owned newspaper there. Certainly in Baltimore, it's the Afro. When you get to Detroit, you have the Michigan Chronicle there. So all the way through, you'll have that kind of support. So hopefully, there's a partnership that's developing there. Alexis. We don't want to dominate the conversation. I'll let you just jump on
that. So we're going to go back into your company, especially since you're talking about doing this bus tour. So how are you leading the national conversation on housing equity, not just with this tour, but also any other possible future endeavors that you or your company may have?
Yeah, so we are actually looking at one of our things that we're doing right now is working with congressional leaders in terms of policy. That's very important for us. With the stroke of a pen, it can affect millions of people. And so we understand that connection between government and home ownership. It's very important. I want to encourage people that are listening to get more involved in your local government, whether it's about home ownership or it's about the school system. Your voice matters. And so one of the things that I learned joining NAREB back in 2008 was that I had a voice. And so for all the young people out there, you have a voice. And we've seen that. Unfortunately, we normally see that when negative things happen, such as a young person being killed by a police officer or whatever the issue is. We see our voices rise, but we can be more proactive with our voices. And so one of the things that NAREB wants to do is be proactive in terms of the home ownership conversation. Again, we've lost that conversation in recent years. We used to call it the American dream, was to buy a home, have your family move into it. And we're starting to see that dream wither away through institutional investors buying up properties in our neighborhood. We're seeing the housing stock. I think in Baltimore, it's just like Los Angeles. You have homes that were built in the late 1800s. And so consumers need to be able to access rehab lending that's more affordable for them to buy a home at a reduced price because of the condition, but be able to access capital to build that home back up and get it back to a great standing part of the neighborhood. And so our issue is around policy to make it easier for the consumer, not make everything easier for these investors that are buying a lot of the properties. We believe in home ownership, and we believe in building wealth for families. And so that's one of our main focuses. And we can go through policy after policy, but right now you can go to any major city and I can guarantee you'll probably see cranes building apartments. What happened to the houses? And so that's our demand. Where are the single family homes with the picket fence that someone can bring their family in and grow? But we're seeing apartments being built left and right.
Mm-hmm. And then in cities like ours, you see a lot of vacant properties as well. We have just so many vacant homes throughout the city of Baltimore. So there are plans to address that, but it takes time, and people need housing now.
They need housing.
You know what else people seem to be curious about? We hear news all the time. The Feds are going to cut the rate a quarter of a point or half a point. What does that mean to the average person when they talk about these rates?
Yeah, so I think rates, we've become a very rate conscious society. And I think that that's very important. Interest rates do matter. Rates matter in terms of what your payment ultimately will be. One of the things that I want everyone to consider, though, let's say the Fed cut the rates by 2%, right? That would be a major reduction. Would never happen. They would have to do it very slowly, a quarter point at a time. But let's just say we wake up tomorrow and the rates are lower. What's going to happen is demand is going to rise. And so when demand rises, price rises. So the property that was once $300,000 now is $400,000, right? Mm-hmm. My mother tells me, she says, you don't know what interest rates are, because when I bought my first home, it was 13%, right? And I said, I know, but you bought for $60,000. I would love to buy a home for $60,000 today. You can give me a 20% interest rate if we
right.
Buy, right? Based on the math. But I would say don't get discouraged by the rate, because if you can afford it, know that the rates will move lower at some point, but the price will never change. So if you buy that price today at $400,000, that price tomorrow is going to be $500,000. And one stat that sticks with me, and I tell all my clients this stat: there has never been, since the late 1960s, a 5-year period where you bought your home and 5 years later it was worth less than when you bought it. And that includes the foreclosure crisis, that includes savings and loans crisis, that includes high unemployment, that includes us going to war, that includes all of these big issues that have impact the economy. There's never been a 5-year period. So when you buy today, just know that the data is in your favor, that in 5 years from now, you'll have a home that's appreciated and is more expensive than what it is today.
Well, that's good practical advice, because people do sometimes react to like a quarter point change, and it's not going to make, all it does is push, like you said, if it goes down a half a point, that may push your price point up. Right.
Yeah. You have 5 people looking at a house today, but you drop that rate a half a point, you have 25 people looking at it and bidding for that same property. And so we want to make sure that we buy when it's most attainable and when you feel the best for your financial situation. We don't encourage you buying a home and being cash poor. right? You can't eat, you don't have anywhere to sleep, you're just going into a structure. We want to make sure that your quality of life is improving through this. But I will consider it the housing conversation is not a silo conversation, because we have to talk about rents. Rents have been on the rise, and no one controls that, right? That's individual properties that reset rents. Even though cities have put in ordinances of rent control, they still are much higher and still are creeping up month over month, year over year. And so we've seen a little bit of a dip over the last couple months. But overall, this rents are something that you can never control. I always say it's better to freeze your mortgage, right? And so your payment to your housing, you can actually freeze it. A 30-year fixed mortgage you bought 10 years ago, you would be making that same mortgage payment, notwithstanding taxes and insurance if those change, but your mortgage payment would be the same that it was 10 years ago. I would challenge anyone to show me that they are paying the same rent today that they were paying 10 years ago. It's not likely. And so that's why homeownership is very important.
That's a very compelling homeownership argument. You're right, because rents go up usually every time the lease is time to renew, and that's annually in most leases. And you have no control. You know, they say this is the new rent. You say, well, it's high. They say, fine, find someplace else to be. So you are exactly right about that. So just getting that down payment, though. But you said there's down payment assistance, so that's a good thing.
A lot of down payments. There's a lot of programs out there, and I'll just advocate one other important area for homeownership. So my grandmother lived in the same place for 40 years. I grew up with my mother. We lived in the same place. And I went to the same school district from elementary through high school graduation. And I think that there's something to be said for stability. When you're a renter, you might have to move on the other side of town, change schools. I have friends that went to 4 or 5 different high schools because they constantly had to move. And so I think that there's something to be said when you can actually plant yourself and your family somewhere that you can have a little bit of stability around you. And so that's very important. I know when I was a younger man, this was some years ago, right? Probably before cell phones, we had pagers. But if you couldn't get in touch with me, you knew where my grandmother was, you knew where my mother was, and you went to the house and said, where's he at? Right. And so there's something to be said about stability. So,
yep. Absolutely. That you make a valid point there. All right. So it's about time for us to get on the box. Megan, unless you have one question before we get on the box.
I just have one question. Actually,
Who's there?
Because, I think just what you're talking about there, I rent. It makes me sick every day that I pay that, and it feels like you're paying into nothing, right? You can't leverage equity and all these things. But for people that are, they want to buy a home, I think sometimes people get caught up on, they want to hit this magic number before they start the home buying process. Is there a magic number? What would be your advice there? And how can somebody know, I'm ready for this?
Yeah, I think that is individual, right? It's going to move from one person to the next. But I would say, data, I love data. So I'll stick in data, right? And so a lot of times we're saying, you know what, I want to save up till I get to this point in my bank account. And then I want to have this, we want this ideal situation. And I understand that. But in the meantime, we still need somewhere to live. And so I would say, we can't take the formula of my dream car and put that into the same formula of home ownership and housing. They're two different things, right? I have a dream car that I want, and I'm going to save up for that and whatnot. But when it comes to my housing, I got to pay. Yesterday was the first of the month. A lot of people had to pay, whether they paid a mortgage or they paid rent. That happened, right? And so I think understanding that either way, you're going to have to pay for somewhere to lay your head at night would mean, like, I would rather do that with something that I own, right? I think about it when I was renting before. You used to have to ask questions. Can I bring in a Christmas tree? If you wanted a Christmas tree, can I do this? Or the sink is clogged, I need to call somebody to do it. And there's something about ownership with that. But I think some of our younger people are also scared that they have all those responsibilities. They just want to pick up the phone and call the landlord and say, this is a problem, right? But you're not growing wealth that way. So every time we make a rent payment, we're putting wealth into someone else's family. But when we make a mortgage payment, we're putting wealth in our family. And so that's what we're supporting.
So, yeah, good. So, I mean, I want to piggyback on Megan's question. So as a young person, is there a magic formula for her to say, you know what, I'm ready? Not, she understands, I think, the benefits, but is it a good, I mean, we know it's good credit. What's a good credit score, for example, or how much income should a person have? I know it's going to depend on the house they buy, right?
It does. So I would say this, what I would bring in terms of magic formula, I would say stability in my employment, right? I think that's very important. My mother worked at the same job for 38 years, right? I had more jobs between 18 and 20 than she did her whole life. And so if you're moving around from a company to companies, then you haven't really had stability in terms of your income. If you have stability in your income, the next level you need to look at is what is most important to me. My son, he loves to travel, right? And I'm talking, hey, it's time to buy a home. We have to have that kind of conversation. He's like, oh, Dad, I'm going to North Carolina. I want to go see this concert, right? And so he needs to get that out of his system. Right. And so I think that's very important. And so I think in terms of magical system, it'll be different for someone. I bought my first home at 21 years of age. But the average first time home buyer today is 40 years old. And so you're not building wealth for those 19 years. That would be problematic for me. And so I just think that those are things. So when we talk about the magic formula, I think it's stability in your job and your employment, making sure that those things are in place. And then after that, it's really about what do you feel comfortable with versus your lifestyle.
Okay, good.
I love to go out and eat, right? And so I might have to do something a little bit different in terms of the house that I want, right? But I've learned how to cook too. So I can get down in the kitchen. And that's now become a passion of mine. But you have to look at maybe making some changes, lifestyle changes that potentially are very important.
Wow. Okay. There's a viewer saying she was 73. Her mother was 73 buying her first home. So that happens. I want to put back up, there's a comment or a question from one of our viewers. I think the last name was Simmons. Let's put that back up, get you to. Okay. So she's asking about a story. I guess that's directed to us. But what do you say about that?
Oh yeah, so I think agents so the question is agents acting as investors flipping homes using unlicensed, and I can't see the unlicensed contract without permit. Yeah, I think there's a growing trend, and unfortunately, when the market is suppressed, you see bad actors in any industry. Right, you see increase in fraud, you see increase in attempts. Last year, there's a report that said 70% of all real estate agents did not close one transaction. Okay, and so you would have to ask yourself, well, how are they surviving? How are they living? Right, and so I think that anyone that's operating from that perspective needs to be held accountable. And so those types of there's methods in terms of escalating those issues, but we're starting to see more of that coming to marketplace, not just with agents, but you also have illegal title transfers that are starting to grow more and more, where people are saying, I own this home, and they're signing it over to someone else, taking mortgages out. That's a very big issue right now. And that's throughout the country. That's not just regional. But I think in some of these, we have very regional issues that need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we do this in the last 5 to 10 minutes of our show every week, and so we're going to do it right now. And Mr. Thomas, you'll have the last word. This is our time to get on the box, to give our viewers your final thoughts. It can be about what we're talking about, which it usually is. And Ashley, you want to go first, or it could be about anything that comes to mind. And it's not a question, it's just, you can just rant for a few minutes if you'd like about any topic related to the topic or not. And that's when we say, don't be a chicken, Alexis. I think I called you Ashley. I know your name is Alexis. Don't be a chicken, Alexis. Get on the box. So you'll go, and then Megan, then I'll go, and our guest will have the last and nothing's, nothing's out of bounds. Say, you can, if you want to talk about what you ate for breakfast this morning, that's okay too, but you're on the box. All right, Alexa, on the box.
I think I'm just grateful to hear this conversation as a young person. I'm only 22 and about to graduate. So hearing about what it takes to actually buy a home and interest rates and things like that, it's kind of an interesting topic and conversation. And it's kind of making me want to think a little bit more about what I want to do in my life when it comes to buying a home.
Okay. You off the box? Yes, she said she's off. You're off the box. Okay. All right, Megan, you're on the box.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo a little bit of what Alexis said. I'm 26, so still young, but I'm getting older, and I'm thinking about, home ownership a lot. I've had some of my friends I have some friends who are still renting, and it's definitely, I think, a scary thing for younger people, especially today. It feels maybe bleak, and you might hear a lot of young people say to you, well, houses back then weren't as expensive, but that's really how we feel. It's scary to think about all the steps that it's going to take to kind of make that leap and have the confidence in yourself as well that you're ready for this, that you can handle this. But I think, being on this call today, any sort of advice and guidance gives you a little more clarity, makes you have a little more confidence when it comes to that. So I am just looking forward to have NAREB in my back pocket when the day comes that I'm ready to start this journey. And I'm really grateful that Mr. Thomas were able to be on this call today. So thank you. And I'm off the box.
All right, thanks, Meg. I too want to thank you, Mrs. Thomas, for joining us today on the Chicken Box, powered by the oldest Black-owned family newspaper in the country, the Afro. Thank you for joining us. What great information. Thank you for your leadership of NAREB. And thank you for the tour that you've organized for to start later on this month for 8 cities, 8 days with all of this information that's invaluable. I learned something, and I'm not going to add, that was 22 and 26. That'll make me like 28 if we keep, we keep going. So I've been a homeowner for a long time, and I didn't appreciate it then, but I appreciate it now that my mother actually gave me a house. Instead of selling the house, she gave me the house and said, if you can assume these mortgage payments, I'll put the house in your name and you can keep on, and that helped. But that was a long, long, long time ago, and I didn't appreciate it, but I understand it now, what she was doing. And so we have wealth in our community. It's just a matter of how we pass it on. And so many times it does get caught up in probate or arguments. I knew a case where a young man unfortunately went to prison and his mother's house was sold. She died and the house was sold while he was in prison, but there was nothing that he could do about it, nothing that he didn't even know about it. So many things happen. So thank you for your policy work. Thank you for your policy work, because that is important, the policies and the laws. And we're in a time where people are discounting local news, and local is really important. There's so many things go on that don't benefit our community. And there's so many things that we don't know. And it ought not to be that big gap between white home ownership and Black home ownership. And we know some of that goes all the way back to what happened after World War II. And the veterans didn't even know they had the benefits. Black veterans didn't even know they had housing benefits. They know more today than they did when they came out of World War II, and did not that they wouldn't take advantage of it, they didn't know they could take advantage of getting the VA loans and things like that. So thank you for the advocacy work you do, for the policy work you do, for the information work that you do. And I'm sure that Megan or someone on our team will be at Carter Memorial to at least get a overview and to share with our readers. And I'll talk with you offline about some of the other things. But thank you for being here today on the Chicken Box. and it's your turn to be on the box.
I'm excited to jump on this chicken box right now. Let me say, Dr. Draper, I really appreciate you. I look forward to our partnership and doing the great work within our community and working together and seeing how we can utilize Black media as we move forward. That's something very important to me. You know, Alexis, I want to congratulate you. You know, you're graduating next month. That's a very exciting time. I think back at 22 years old, and you have your whole life ahead of you. So continue to keep doing the great work. It was great to meet you. And Megan, you're doing a phenomenal job. I love your resume, and we had an opportunity to talk. So just keep doing a great job. But I'm on the chicken box. So let me say this, because I love this part of the show, right? So now that I'm on the chicken box, I want to say something to all the listeners that are out there. Today, we talked about home ownership. Today, we talked about down payment assistance, why it's important to be a homeowner. I'm on the chicken box. I want you to know that I'm not on my high box. There's no shame in renting, okay? We just want to have a strategy. That's it. I want you to know that if you're renting, maybe that's the season that you're in, but you can be in that season and still come out and get the education that is needed to one day become a homeowner. And so let's not take that away from you. I don't want you to remove it from yourself. I met a young man many years ago, and I say this, and many times I'm able to do interviews or be on podcasts. The young man said, my father never bought a home because he didn't want to be told he wasn't good enough. And so I want to continue to say, let's remove that trauma from home ownership. If you're not ready today, there's a Realtors member that's in your city that will help you get ready. And if it takes you 36 months, 24 months, or 3 months, we're going to hold your hand through the entire process. And that's who Realtors are. That's why I love being a part. I'm a member of NAREB. I just have the honor to be the president, but I'm a Realtors member at heart. And so I know that the members that we have across the country, they're great. And Dr. Draper, I thank you for allowing me to rant this morning. And I'm just excited. I look forward to working with you all in the near future.
You're welcome. And some of your fan club has been watching this and giving you kudos along the way. And so I see your question, Sandra, about getting involved. I don't know exactly what you mean. You have Mr. Thomas's information there. If you want to reach us at the Afro, we're going to put up editor@afro.com. You can then, you'll reach our managing editor and she'll filter it to wherever it needs to go. Visit afro.com. Come on, y'all, take out a subscription wherever you are. The Afro can reach you electronically, digitally. Support the Black owned media in your town, wherever you are as well, because 2 historic Black newspapers closed this year in January. And a lot of that's because of lack of support. And people will say, oh, well, it's not social media. It's us, the misinformation, the disinformation, and the intentionality about supporting our own. So let's support NAREB when they come around, and NAREB when they come around, and let's be informed, engaged homeowners or renters, whatever we are, and policy makers and supporters. If my co-host Impeccable was on today, he would say, reach out to a senior. Don't text them, call them. And even with this information you have today, some of them may need this information so that they can be at ease knowing that the property they worked hard to get and to keep passes on the way they want it to be. So it's great. Thank you again. And we are now officially going to sign off from the box. Alexis and Megan, you are certainly great co-hosts. I appreciate you all being with us today as well. And again, Mr. Thomas, I agree with Nicole Wyatt and others. Great job, Mr. President. All right, take care, everybody. See you next time.